The quiet I'd been chasing since the Gulf of Mexico EMP fiasco and the Argus IS fiery demise felt different this time. Less like a temporary ceasefire, more like the dead calm before a Category 5. I'd brought the Sea Witch up the coast, found a forgotten little creek off the intracoastal near Apalachicola, a place where the egrets outnumbered the people, and the only sounds were the tide sighing through the marsh grass and the buzz of mosquitoes the size of small birds. I was patching sails, scraping barnacles, trying to convince myself that Ouroboros, Vance, Croft, Thorne, and the whole damn alphabet soup of global conspiracies had bigger fish to fry than one broken-down ex-operative on a leaky boat. It was a nice thought. Didn't last. Sully found me, of course. He always did. Not a direct call. I'd gone dark on all known channels after the Gulf. This was more subtle, a ripple in the digital ether. He triggered an alert on one of my oldest, deepest, supposedly burned-out encrypted dead drops, a virtual mailbox I hadn't checked in years, set up for truly apocalyptic contingencies. His message, when I finally, reluctantly accessed it from a grimy internet cafe in town using layers of anonymizers, was short. Mako, signal received your box 7, high-level encryption, unknown origin, extreme urgency asserted. Source self-identifies Cassandra. Message attached. Your eyes only. Proceed with extreme prejudice. Sandman. Cassandra. Great. Prophetess of doom nobody believed until it was too late. And Sully using extreme prejudice usually meant, Dawn, touch this with a 10-foot pole unless you enjoy being shot at by professionals. I opened the attached file. It was a cry for help, wrapped in layers of paranoia and sophisticated code. To the operative known as Mako, or his successors, it began, the formality chilling. My employer, Aethel Corporation, is a primary financial conduit and logistical partner for global syndicate operations you identify as Ouroboros. I possess verifiable proof, direct wire transfers to known front companies, encrypted executive communications detailing support for arms trafficking, bio-research initiatives, political destabilization campaigns. They are funding atrocities. I cannot go to authorities. Aethel controls too many. I seek your assistance to expose them, to stop this. I have access to internal servers, but need operational support for secure data extraction and dissemination. Time is critical. My own position is becoming untenable. They suspect a leak. If you are real, if you are still operational, reply via reverse handshake to this signal path with authentication phrase silent running. Further contact protocols will follow. Ouroboros, Aethel Corporation, a massive, faceless multinational dealing in everything from logistics to private security to, apparently, funding global mayhem, bio-research initiatives. My blood ran cold, the memory of Rostova and the Nightingale plague canisters still vivid. This Cassandra wasn't just whispering about white-collar crime. She was talking about the puppet masters themselves, the ones bankrolling the monsters I kept running into. My first instinct was to delete the message, scrub the connection, sail the Sea Witch south until I ran out of ocean. This was exactly the kind of high-level, deeply entrenched conspiracy I'd sworn off. Anonymous whistleblower, unverifiable claims, a direct line back into Ouroboros's financial heart, smelled like a meticulously crafted trap from a mile away. But Aethel Corporation. The name tickled something in the back of my mind. I pulled up my own encrypted archive, the fragmented intel gathered from Panama, from Croft's network, from the Ouroboros data card Thorne had briefly let me see. Ran a search. There it was. Aethel Corp, listed as a minor shareholder in several offshore entities, linked to both Vance Global Holdings and Croft Foundation, charitable disbursements. A subtle connection, but a connection nonetheless. And the mention of bio-research. After the Everglades, that word alone was enough to make my skin crawl. I sat in the stuffy internet cafe, the smell of stale coffee and cheap electronics thick around me, and thought of Anna Ivanescu, sacrificed for Black Sea gas. Thought of Eva Rostova, forced to weaponize plague. Thought of the innocent woman abducted in Coconut Grove. Ouroboros didn't just deal in chaos. They consumed lives with an indifferent corporate efficiency. Sully said Cassandra was extreme urgency. If she was genuine, and if Aethel Corp was as deeply embedded as she claimed, she wouldn't last long once their internal security focused on her. And if her intel could expose a primary funding artery for Ouroboros. Against every screaming instinct for self-preservation, I typed the reply, silent running. The response came within minutes. New secure channel coordinates, a time for first contact, audio only, and a single grainy satellite image of a specific waterfront cafe in Panama City, the city where Silas Vance ran his Ouroboros operations. This whistleblower wasn't just offering intel, she was offering a direct route back into the Viper S-Nest ID barely escaped before, Panama City again. Hotter, wetter, more overtly corrupt than I remembered. The flight in, using another of Sully's expertly crafted and eye-wateringly expensive consultant identities, David Chance, this time, specializing in corporate risk assessment, was uneventful. Finding the waterfront cafe from Cassandra's satellite image was easy enough. It was a tourist trap, bustling, noisy, offering overpriced ceviche and a decent view of the container ships lining up for the canal. Perfect for an anonymous meet. I took an outdoor table, ordered a local beer I didn't intend to drink, and waited, watching the crowd, the street, the reflections in the cafe windows. My new burner phone, procured locally, buzzed precisely at the agreed-upon time. Encrypted call, voice heavily modulated. "Mr. Chance?" The voice was female, low, laced with an almost unbearable tension. Definitely not the cool, collected tones of a seasoned operative. This was a civilian, scared out of her mind. "You can call me Jack," I said, keeping my own voice neutral. "You're Cassandra?" "Yes, that is the name I used." A shaky breath. "Thank you for responding. I wasn't sure. What makes you think Aethel Corp is funding Ouroboros? And what kind of atrocities are we talking about?" I cut to the chase. No time for pleasantries. Her story spilled out then, fragmented, terrified, but backed by a chilling coherence. Nina Petrova, she finally gave her real name, was a mid-level compliance analyst at Aethel Panama City headquarters. She'd stumbled across encrypted ledgers, shielded accounts, coded transfers that, when she started digging deeper, led directly to known Ouroboros front companies, to black operations funding, to project names that made my blood run cold. Nightingale variants, Serpiente Durmiente, Sleeping Serpent, a follow-up to Emplumata, even mentions of Argus contingency funding. "They're not just funding them," Nina whispered, her voice cracking. "They are them, or part of them. The CEO, Mr. Alistair Thorne." My hand tightened on the phone. Thorne? Not Marcus. A different Thorne? Or was Marcus using a new alias, a new level of corporate camouflage? The name alone was a punch to the gut. "He's a true believer," Nina continued, oblivious to my internal reaction. "Talks about global rebalancing, necessary catalysts for change. The money I've traced, it's going to fund operations that destabilize governments, yes, but also research, horrific research, things that should never see the light of day. I have copies of some preliminary project outlines. I can get you more, but they know someone is accessing the sensitive servers. They're locking things down. I don't have much time." Alistair Thorne, bioresearch, Ouroboros. It was all coming together. Another venomous knot in the serpent's coils. Nina Petrova, the terrified whistleblower, had just handed me a live wire connected directly to the heart of the conspiracy, and her cryptic contract wasn't just about exposing a corrupt corporation, it was about preventing something monstrous. Again. "All right, Nina," I said, the weariness settling in, heavy as the Panamanian humidity. "Tell me where we start, and tell me what you need from me to get that proof out safely." The game was back on, whether I wanted it or not. Panama City suddenly felt like the edge of the abyss. "Alistair Thorne throws this thing every year," Nina Petrova told me, her voice a nervous whisper over the encrypted comms link 2 days after our initial unsettling contact. We were using a one-time secure channel Sully had helped me set up before I went completely dark after the Gulf mess, a channel I never thought I'd use again. The Aethel Foundation charity ball, supposedly for rainforest preservation or some such nonsense. Mostly it's for Thorne to rub shoulders with Panama's elite, grease palms, and make deals in plain sight. "He'll be there?" I asked. The CEO of Aethel Corporation, the man Nina claimed was funding Ouroboros atrocities. Seeing him in his natural habitat felt like a necessary first step before trying to crack his corporate servers. "Front and center," Nina confirmed. "And so will the heads of every major bank, shipping line, and political faction in this city, plus a few international guests who always seem to show up when Thorne hosts." She hesitated. "I might be able to add a name to a subsidiary company's guest table, someone plausible. An investment consultant, perhaps? Low profile enough not to draw too much attention, but with enough implied capital to belong." "David Chance, Sterling Group International," I supplied. Sully could backstop the corporate shell if anyone bothered to look too closely. "Make sure Chance appreciates modern art with a Latin American influence. Gives him an excuse to wander." "I'll try," Nina said, her voice tight. "The ball is tomorrow night, at the old Convento de Santo Domingo, the restored part. Very exclusive, very high security." The Convento de Santo Domingo, or what remained of it after centuries of fires and pirates, loomed over Casco Viejo like a grand, aging dowager draped in new jewels. Floodlights illuminated its ancient stone arches and meticulously restored courtyards. Valets in crisp white jackets wrestled with a steady stream of Bentleys, armored Mercedes, and an occasional ostentatious Ferrari. The air hummed with money, power, and the murmur of Spanish, English, and half a dozen other languages. My rented tuxedo felt like a costume designed by someone who hated me, but it got me past the first security checkpoint. The invitation Nina had managed to procure via her internal access. Mr. David Chance, Sterling Group, was scrutinized, scanned, and finally approved with a curt nod from a severe-looking woman with an earpiece and eyes that promised a painful cavity search if I stepped out of line. Inside, it was a different world. Champagne flowed like water from the Panama Canal. A string quartet sawed away discreetly in one colonnaded courtyard. Another courtyard held a silent auction of ridiculously overpriced modern art and experiences. A week on a private island, dinner with a visiting dignitary, all proceeds to the Aethel Foundation for Ecological Harmony, or some such bullshit. The irony was thick enough to spread on toast. These people were probably funding the destruction of half the planet with one hand, while patting themselves on the back for saving a tree frog with the other. I circulated, playing the part of David Chance, mid-level investment shark, slightly out of his depth but trying to look like he belonged, nursing a glass of champagne, feigning interest in the art, mostly listening. The chatter was predictable. Offshore accounts, new shipping routes, who was up, who was down in the government lottery, whose wife was sleeping with whose polo instructor. The usual soundtrack of the global elite at play. Alistair Thorne held court near a tiered fountain spilling actual spring water, not recycled city stuff. He was exactly as Nina described. Tall, impeccably dressed in a custom tuxedo, silver hair swept back from a high forehead, radiating an aura of benign authority and effortless charm. He shook hands, laughed easily, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He looked like everyone's favorite philanthropic uncle, except when his gaze swept the room, those same eyes held a flicker of something else. Cold, appraising, utterly ruthless, the eyes of a predator. He was surrounded by the usual sycophants, Panamanian politicians with two white smiles, portly bankers sweating in their tuxedos, bejeweled women whose faces hadn't seen genuine emotion in decades, and a few others who didn't quite fit the mold. A lean, hard-faced man with Eastern European features who stood slightly behind Thorne, watching everyone, saying nothing, looked like a security chief, or maybe Ouroboros liaison. I made a mental note. Another was a woman with striking, almost unnaturally black hair and eyes that seemed to absorb the light, introduced to Thorne by a nervous-looking aide as Senora Herrera, representing certain private agricultural interests in Colombia. Her handshake with Thorne lingered a fraction too long. Another potential thread. My job tonight wasn't to make waves. It was to observe, identify, map the connections. Who did Thorne spend real time with, beyond the glad-handing? Who got the private word in the quiet corner? Who looked like they were doing actual business amidst the charity charade? I saw a few familiar types, if not faces. Men who had the same predatory stillness as the Ouroboros operatives ID encountered before. The stiletto team in the Gulf, Zhukov's muscle, even some of Marcus Thorne's old agency shadows. They weren't obvious, didn't wear uniforms, but they moved with a certain economy, their eyes never still, always scanning, assessing. They were the silent partners, the enforcers, the ones who made sure the ecological harmony Aethel promoted didn't get disrupted by inconvenient truths. One conversation fragment, overheard as I pretended to admire a particularly garish abstract sculpture, snagged my attention. Two men, American accents, expensive suits, talking low, intense. The new Cayman Island holding company is clean, capitalization complete, ready for Phase 2 disbursement to the Amazonas Basin project. The other man nodded. Good. Thorne assures me the local environmental impact assessments will be favorable. Amazonas Basin project. Sounded benign. Probably involved clear-cutting rainforest for something Ouroboros wanted. Rare earth minerals, maybe another bio-research facility like the one in the Everglades. Aethel Corporation, saving the planet one dirty deal at a time. Later, I saw Alistair Thorne himself in a quiet alcove, deep in conversation with a man I recognized instantly from Finch S. stolen art files and Sully S. subsequent intel dive, Paddle 9 from the Atherton estate auction, the quiet man with the earpiece who'd bid aggressively against me for the weaponized Diebenkorn forgery, the representative of Helios Fine Art Acquisition and the Digital Hydra Dark Web Forum, Ouroboros' cyberwarfare division right here, schmoozing with the CEO of Aethel Corporation at a charity ball in Panama. The connection wasn't just financial, it was operational, direct. Paddle 9, older, nondescript in his own tuxedo, didn't look like a master hacker. He looked like an accountant, maybe a mid-level diplomat. But his eyes, when they briefly flicked towards me as I passed the alcove, were cold, intelligent, utterly devoid of emotion. He didn't recognize me as Cole from the auction. David Chance was a different face, different cover. But his presence here, talking privately with Alistair Thorne, confirmed Nina Petrova's worst fears, and mine. Aethel Corporation wasn't just funding Ouroboros. It was a key player, a hub, facilitating operations across multiple spectrums, financial, cyber, probably worse. The gala started winding down around midnight. The string quartet packed up. The champagne well ran dry. The deals were done, the connections reaffirmed. I retrieved my rented Cadillac from the valet, after a discreet $100 bill expedited the process, and drove away from the glittering convento, heading back towards the anonymity of my cheap hotel in the newer part of the city. No smoking gun tonight. No dramatic confrontation. Just quiet observation, confirmation of a rotten core beneath the polished surface. Alistair Thorne was Ouroboros, through and through. And Paddle 9, one of their key cyber operatives, was on his payroll, or at least in his network. Nina Petrova's intel was solid. Now came the hard part. Getting inside Aethel's servers, finding the irrefutable proof of their atrocities she claimed was there, and getting it out before their internal security or Ouroboros' enforcers shut her down permanently. The elite gathering had revealed the enemy. The next step was to breach their fortress. The Aethel Foundation charity ball glittered on the surface, all champagne bubbles and philanthropic platitudes. Beneath it, as always, swam the sharks. Seeing Alistair Thorne, Aethel's CEO, in deep conversation with Paddle 9, Ouroboros, cyber maven from the Key West fiasco, confirmed everything Nina Petrova had whispered. Aethel Corporation wasn't just a piggy bank for the syndicate. It was a key operational hub. Now we needed the bank statements. Nina's apartment was a small, neat place in a decent building in El Cangrejo, the kind favored by mid-level expats and professionals. Not flashy, but with good locks and a doorman who minded his own business if his palm was occasionally greased. She set up her Aethel Corp laptop, the one she used for remote work, on a small dining table. A second heavily encrypted burner tablet ID provided slave to it for secure data exfiltration to one of Sully's anonymous cloud servers. I stood near the window, watching the street below, a knot of tension tightening in my gut. This was her show, her risk. My job was to be the ghost in the machine, the voice on the comms, and the cleanup crew if things went sideways, which they usually did. "Ready?" I asked, keeping my voice low. We were using a short-range encrypted voice link between my burner phone and hers, just in case the apartment itself had ears. "As I'll ever be," Nina replied, her voice tight but surprisingly steady. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "I have my credentials, accessing the primary archive server now, bypassing the first firewall. Okay, I'm in the main directory." "Looking for financials, Nina," I reminded her. "Specifically offshore transfers, project funding for anything with Ouroboros codenames, Nightingale, Serpiente, Argus Contingency, anything that smells like them. Look for Alistair Thorne's direct authorization codes, anything linking him personally to the disbursements." "Working on it." The only sound in the room for the next 10 minutes was the soft click of her keyboard, the hum of the air conditioner, and my own breathing. I watched the street. A black sedan with diplomatic plates idled across the way. Just a coincidence? Or Aethel Security already doing a sweep after the gala, checking on key personnel involved in sensitive projects? My paranoia was a well-honed instrument. "Got something," Nina breathed, her voice sharp with excitement and fear. "Encrypted ledger. Project Phoenix subaccounts. Requires secondary authentication," she typed rapidly. "Thorne's personal access key. I managed to copy it from his terminal last month during a system upgrade. Risky, but..." Her voice trailed off. "Okay, I'm in." On my own tablet, slaved to her screen feed via a secure local connection, I saw the ledger appear. Rows and rows of coded transactions, dates, amounts that made my eyebrows climb. Shell corporations in Nauru, the Seychelles, Isle of Man, Liechtenstein, all the usual flags for money trying to disappear. Then, the recipient codes. I recognized some of them from Sully's deep dives into Vance Global Holdings and Croft Foundation fronts. Ouroboros, millions flowing like water disguised as logistical support, consultation fees, research grants. "Look for disbursement authorizations, Nina," I urged. "Anything with Thorne's direct signature or override." Her fingers flew again. "Here, memo from Thorne to CFO, authorizing expedited funding for Project Chimera contingency planning." cross-referenced to a numbered account in the Caymans, Project Chimera, the EMP weapon from the Argus I satellite. Aethel was funding its potential recovery or replication. Another one, Nightingale variant development, Phase 2 supplemental budget. And here, Serpiente Durmiente operational seed funding via Pan-Isthmus Logistics intermediary account. Bioweapons, political destabilization, financial cyber warfare. Aethel Corporation wasn't just a bank. It was Ouroboros' one-stop shop for global mayhem, with CEO Alistair Thorne signing the checks. Nina was right. This was monstrous. "Copy it all, Nina," I said, my voice grim. "Every ledger, every memo, every authorization. Get it onto the encrypted drive, then to Sully's cloud server. We need it all." She started the download, the progress bar crawling with agonizing slowness. Each percentage point felt like a lifetime. I watched the street. The black sedan was still there. Another one, identical, pulled up behind it. Two men got out of the second car, spoke briefly to the occupants of the first, then started walking slowly towards Nina's apartment building. Not a coincidence. Not anymore. "Nina," I said urgently. "We have company. Two men, professional look, heading for your building entrance now. How much longer on that download?" "Almost 70%, she stammered, her eyes darting between her screen and the apartment door. "They can't know. How could they know?" "Silent alarms, data access flags, AI monitoring," I snapped. "Doesn't matter. They know someone is in the cookie jar. We need to go, now. Can you sever the connection cleanly, leave no trace on your laptop?" I think so. If I abort the download now, abort it at 90%, I decided. Get the core files, then scrub your local drive, kill the connection. We leave the laptop. Looks like you were working late, got interrupted, panicked. But the rest of the data... We have enough to burn, Thorne. Expose Aethel's Ouroboros link. That's the priority. My eyes were fixed on the street. The two men had entered her building. How long until they reached her floor, her apartment? 85%. Come on, Nina. The progress bar hit 90. "Now, Nina, kill it! Scrub it! Move!" She typed frantically, her face pale, slick with sweat. "Scrubbing. Connection terminated. Done." She grabbed the small encrypted thumb drive containing the downloaded files, shoved it into her pocket. "Let's go," I said, already moving towards the service stairs exit I'd scouted earlier. "Back way, no elevators." We slipped out of her apartment just as we heard the faint chime of the elevator arriving on her floor down the hallway. Heavy footsteps approached her front door. We didn't wait to see who it was. Pounded down the concrete service stairs, bursting out into a narrow back alley smelling of overflowing dumpsters and tropical decay. "My car?" Nina began, looking towards the street where she usually parked. "Forget it," I said, pulling her towards the busier thoroughfare at the end of the alley. "It'll be watched. We need to disappear into the crowd." We hit the main street, merging with the late-afternoon throng of office workers heading home, tourists heading for dinner, blending in, just two more anonymous faces in the urban sprawl. But as we rounded the corner, I saw them again. The same two men who'd entered Nina's building, now exiting, scanning the street, their eyes sharp, missing nothing. And the black sedan, pulling away from the curb near Nina's apartment, heading slowly in our direction. They hadn't just been suspicious, they'd been waiting, closing the net. Our little data raid hadn't gone unnoticed. The trail of corruption was clear, the proof was on Nina's thumb drive. But now, Aethel Corporation, and by extension Ouroboros, knew they had a leak. And they knew, or would very soon find out, who that leak was. The gala hosts were definitely suspicious, and their hunters were on our heels. The chase through Panama City had just begun. "They're here!" Nina hissed, grabbing my arm, her knuckles white. We'd barely made it 2 blocks from her apartment building, trying to melt into the late-afternoon crowds on Via España. "That black sedan, it just turned the corner, the one from my street." I didn't need to look. I'd already clocked it. A big, anonymous American car with tinted windows, moving too slow, too deliberately for Panama City traffic. And the two men who'd exited Nina's building just moments after us? They were now casually flanking us from across the wide avenue, pretending to window shop, their reflections caught briefly in the glass of a high-end jewelry store. Aethel Corporation's private security, or Ouroboros muscle. Didn't much matter. They weren't here to offer us a ride. "Walk," I said, keeping my voice low, calm, taking Nina's arm gently but firmly. "Don't run, not yet. Head for the old quarter. Casco Viejo. Now." She nodded, terrified but holding it together, her eyes darting nervously. We picked up the pace, weaving through the throngs of office workers, tourists, lottery ticket vendors, street hawkers selling cheap electronics and fried plantains. The air was thick with diesel fumes, humidity, the distant salsa beat from a storefront radio. The black sedan kept pace, a patient shark in the river of traffic. The two flankers crossed the avenue at the next light, falling in behind us, maintaining distance but undeniably there. Casco Viejo, the historic district, narrow cobblestone streets, crumbling colonial architecture cheek by jowl with meticulously restored boutique hotels and trendy cafes, wrought iron balconies dripping bougainvillea, hidden plazas, blind alleys, better ground for evasion than these wide, open boulevards. If we could make it there. "They're gaining," Nina whispered, her breath catching. "I know," I said. The flankers were closer now, maybe 50 yards back. The sedan was trying to cut ahead, likely aiming to block the next major intersection leading towards the old town. Time to change the rules. "This corner," I said, as we approached a crowded intersection where Cala 50 met a narrower side street plunging into a bustling market area. "When the light changes, we run. Don't look back. Just run. Stay with me." The light turned green for pedestrians. The black sedan, anticipating our move, surged forward, trying to block the crosswalk. Too slow. I grabbed Nina's hand, pulled her hard. "Now!" We sprinted into the chaotic flow of the market, overflowing stalls selling everything from cheap plastic toys to fresh fish, shouting vendors, push carts, stray dogs, bewildered tourists. The smells were overwhelming: spices, rotting fruit, exhaust fumes, grilling meat. Perfect cover. We plunged deeper, knocking over a display of mangoes, ignoring the vendors' angry shouts, using the momentary confusion to our advantage. Behind us, I heard angry yells, then the distinct thump of a car door slamming. Our flankers were on foot now, pushing into the market after us. The sedan was useless in these narrow, crowded confines. "This way!" I pulled Nina down a tight alleyway between two buildings, reeking of stale garbage and something unidentifiably foul. It opened into a slightly wider, less crowded street, lined with old apartment buildings, peeling paint, laundry hanging from balconies. Casco Viejo proper. We kept running. My leg wound from the Serafina Inferno, still a dull ache, protesting the sudden exertion. Nina, fueled by adrenaline, kept pace surprisingly well. We twisted through a maze of narrow streets, past ancient churches, their stone walls stained with centuries of grime, across small, sun-drenched plazas where old men played dominoes, oblivious. I glanced back occasionally, saw glimpses of our pursuers, professionals, moving fast, splitting up, trying to anticipate our route, cutting off escape angles. They were good. Then, bad luck. We turned a corner into what looked like a through street, only to find it ended abruptly in a high stone wall. The cul-de-sac cluttered with overflowing trash bins and a couple of feral cats who eyed us with supreme indifference. A dead end. "Trapped!" Nina gasped, her face ashen. Footsteps pounded at the entrance to the cul-de-sac. Two of them. The first flanker from the avenue and another one, bigger, meaner looking. They blocked the only way out, weapons now visible, short, ugly machine pistols held ready. "Nowhere to go, amigos," the first one said, a thin, cruel smile on his face. His Spanish was Colombian, like Rico Alvarez's boys back in Miami. Ouroboros definitely had a type. No time for talk. I shoved Nina hard towards the side wall, behind a particularly large, reeking dumpster. "Stay down!" As they advanced, I scanned desperately. The stone wall was too high to scale quickly. The buildings on either side were sheer, no obvious handholds. Then I saw it. Bolted precariously to the crumbling facade of the building to our right, almost hidden by a tangle of overgrown vines, was an ancient, rusting iron fire escape ladder leading upwards towards the rooftops. Looked like it hadn't been used since Noriega was in power. "The ladder!" I yelled to Nina, pointing. "Go! Up! Now!" While she scrambled towards it, I kicked over a stack of loose wooden crates near the dumpster, sending them clattering towards the advancing gunmen, creating a momentary obstacle, a sliver of distraction. They hesitated, weapons still up. Nina reached the ladder, started climbing, her movements clumsy with fear but desperate. The iron groaned ominously under her weight. The first gunman recovered, fired a short burst towards the ladder. Sparks flew off the rusted metal near Nina's feet. She cried out, almost losing her grip. I charged him then, not with a weapon. The Makarov was long gone, my current sidearm still tucked away, but with pure, desperate force, like a linebacker hitting the gap. He wasn't expecting it. I slammed into him, driving my shoulder into his chest, knocking him off balance, sending his machine pistol clattering away across the cobblestones. We both went down hard. The second gunman swung his weapon towards me. Before he could fire, Nina, halfway up the ladder, screamed again, not in fear this time, but a deliberate, piercing shriek, simultaneously kicking a loose flower pot balanced precariously on a nearby windowsill. The pot shattered on the cobblestones near the second gunman's feet, making him jump, momentarily spoiling his aim. That was the break. I rolled free from the first gunman, scooped up his dropped machine pistol, heavier than I liked, but beggars couldn't be choosers, and fired a quick, unaimed burst towards the second gunman, forcing him to dive for cover behind a parked scooter. "Nina, keep climbing!" I yelled, scrambling towards the fire escape myself. The first gunman was getting back to his feet, reaching for another weapon. I fired another short burst, kicking up dust around him, making him rethink his immediate future. Reached the ladder. Started climbing, the rusted iron groaning under my weight, chunks of masonry dislodging from the wall. Below, the gunmen were firing upwards now, rounds smacking into the brickwork around me. Nina was almost at the top, silhouetted against the sky. I hauled myself onto the relatively flat, gravel-strewn rooftop, just as Nina scrambled over the parapet. We were exposed again, but with more options than the dead-end alley. The rooftops of Casco Viejo stretched out before us, a chaotic jumble of different heights, angles, obstacles. And our pursuers were already starting up the fire escape ladder, their angry shouts echoing from below. Kincaid looked around, heart pounding. To their left, a narrow gap separated their rooftop from an adjacent, slightly lower building housing what looked like a cheap hotel, its windows dark. To their right, a series of connected rooftops leading deeper into the old quarter, but offering no obvious way down. The fire escape was their only route up here. He made a split-second decision. He grabbed Nina's arm, pulling her towards the gap. "We jump!" "Are you insane?" she cried, looking down at the 3-story drop to the alley below if they missed. "More insane to stay here," Kincaid countered, already judging the distance. "Maybe 10 feet across, 5 feet down. Doable, if they were lucky." He pointed towards a cluster of satellite dishes and a sturdy-looking air conditioning unit on the hotel roof. "Aim for that AC unit. It'll break our fall if we overshoot the edge. On my count. 3, 2, 1. He shoved her forward, then leaped himself, launching them both into the humid Panamanian air, the shouts of their pursuers just feet behind them, the outcome anything but certain. "My ankle!" Nina cried out as we hit the gritty tar paper of the adjacent hotel rooftop, the impact jarring through me, sending a fresh stab of pain up my own leg. I think I twisted it." "No time for sprains," I grunted, hauling her up, adrenaline still pumping hot and fast. Gunfire erupted from the rooftop we'd just abandoned, rounds smacking into the parapet wall near our heads. "Move! Fire escape! Now!" The hotel was older, shabbier than the restored colonial building we'd leaped from. Its fire escape looked like a rusted relic, clinging precariously to the brickwork. But it was a way down. Nina, wincing with every step but pushed by sheer terror, scrambled onto it. I followed, glancing back. Two of Thorne's men were at the edge of the other roof, lining up shots. I fired a short burst from the machine pistol I'd liberated, forcing them to duck, then plunged down the rattling fire escape after Nina. We hit the narrow alleyway below, a fetid passage reeking of stale cooking oil and something unidentifiably foul. Kept moving, deeper into the labyrinth of Casco Viejo, twisting through alleys barely wide enough for a pushcart, past crumbling walls painted with vibrant murals, under sagging balconies dripping laundry. The sounds of pursuit faded, swallowed by the old city's indifference. We didn't stop until we reached a particularly disreputable-looking pension near the old Mercado Público, its faded sign promising clean rooms, low prices. The kind of place where nobody asked for ID as long as your cash was good. The room was small, hot, furnished with a sagging bed, a single fly-blown plastic chair, and a cracked mirror that reflected back two desperate, grimy figures. I wedged the chair under the doorknob, checked the flimsy window lock. Temporary safety. Maybe. Nina collapsed onto the bed, cradling her ankle, her face pale and streaked with dirt. I think we lost them," she panted. "For now," I corrected, my voice hard. I turned to face her, the adrenaline starting to curdle into cold anger and suspicion. "All right, Nina. Talk. They found us at your apartment way too fast. They were waiting. How did Aethel's security know you were hitting those servers right then? And how did they get onto us on the street before we'd gone 3 blocks? She looked away, her gaze skittering around the squalid room. I don't know. Maybe they had better surveillance than I thought." "Bullshit," I snapped. "You triggered something, or someone tipped them off before you even started the download. Which is it?" My own history with compromised assets, with betrayals orchestrated by unseen hands, was a raw nerve. Varga, Camilla, Sparrow. Was Nina just the latest? Her composure finally broke. Tears welled in her eyes, cutting clean tracks through the grime on her cheeks. I was already under investigation," she choked out, the words tumbling over each other. "Before I ever contacted you, my supervisor, he started asking questions weeks ago about my system access logs, about off-hours work. I think he suspected something, maybe not what, but something. And you didn't think that was relevant information to share with the guy you hired to help you commit corporate espionage?" My voice was dangerously quiet now. "I was scared," she cried. "Scared they'd grab me before I could get the real proof. I thought if you were involved with your reputation." So she had known more about me than just Mako. "You could get it out faster. Protect me. I panicked when you replied. I pushed to access the servers last night because I knew they were closing in on me." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a desperate plea for understanding. "It wasn't just about exposing Aethel's Ouroboros funding, Jack. Not entirely." "Then what was it about, Nina?" She took a shaky breath. "Alistair Thorne," she said, the name a venomous whisper. He destroyed my father. Years ago. My father was a junior partner in a legitimate shipping firm Thorne wanted. Thorne used Aethel's financial muscle, its political connections, to ruin him. Fabricated charges, blacklisted him. My father lost everything. Died a broken man a year later. Her voice was raw with old grief and fresh hatred. The Ouroboros funding, that was my way in. My excuse to dig deep into Thorne's personal accounts, his secure files. I wasn't just looking for corporate malfeasance, I was looking for the specific orders, the direct evidence that would link Alistair Thorne personally to my father's destruction. That's the proof I was trying to download when they cut me off. That's what I still need. So, not just a whistleblower driven by altruism, a woman on a deeply personal vendetta, using Ouroboros as a crowbar to get at Alistair Thorne. It explained her desperation, her recklessness, her willingness to contact a ghost like me. It also explained why she withheld critical information about her own compromised status. She was afraid I'd refuse if I knew her primary motive was revenge, not just saving the world. I leaned against the wall, processing it. Felt a grudging flicker of something that wasn't quite sympathy, but maybe understanding. Revenge was a powerful motivator. I knew that one firsthand. But her personal crusade had nearly gotten us both killed, repeatedly. "Your father," I said slowly. "Thorne ruined him using Aethel's power?" She nodded, tears streaming silently now. "He was a good man. Honest. Thorne crushed him like an insect." "And the data you got before they cut you off?" I asked, pulling out the encrypted thumb drive. "Does it have what you need against Thorne? Personally?" She shook her head miserably. "Some of it. Financial trails, coded authorizations, but not the smoking gun, not the direct orders. That was still downloading. So the primary objective, from her perspective, was still out there. And Aethel's security, led by Alistair Thorne and his Ouroboros cronies, were now hunting us with extreme prejudice, knowing we'd accessed their deepest, darkest secrets. My simple retrieve and expose mission had just become a hell of a lot more complicated. Protecting Nina, getting her out, while also trying to get enough leverage to actually hurt Thorne and Ouroboros. The odds felt impossibly long. "All right," I said, pushing myself off the wall. The adrenaline was gone, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness and the familiar throb of old wounds. So Thorne knows someone was inside his personal piggy bank, and he knows we have at least some of the receipts. I looked at Nina, huddled on the bed, her face a mask of tear-streaked grief and fear. "First things first. We need to get out of this room, out of this district, before they trace us here. Then we figure out how to get you your pound of flesh without getting us both buried in a Panama City landfill." Just as I reached for the doorknob to check the hallway, the flimsy wood suddenly splintered inwards. The chair I'd wedged beneath it flew across the room. Two figures in dark tactical gear, faces obscured by balaclavas, silenced weapons raised, filled the doorway. No polite knocking this time. They'd found us. Fast. Too damn fast. The flimsy door of the El Carrillo flophouse exploded inwards before I even had a chance to register the chair I bought wedged under the knob was so much as wobbling. Splintered wood flew. Two figures filled the doorway, black tactical gear, suppressed submachine guns already spitting fire, carving up the pathetic contents of the room, the sagging bed, the cracked mirror, the single plastic chair. "Down!" I yelled, shoving Nina hard towards the floor, throwing myself sideways behind the dubious cover of the overturned mattress, just as a line of bullets stitched the wall where we'd been standing. Plaster dust filled the air, mingling with the smell of cordite. No polite introductions this time, no ultimatum, just professional, overwhelming force. They knew who we were, knew what Nina had taken. They wanted us dead, and the data drive silenced. "Window!" Nina screamed from the floor, coughing from the dust, pointing towards the grimy opening that overlooked the alley. It was our only way out. I laid down, suppressing fire with the machine pistol ID liberated from the gallery goons, short, controlled bursts, aiming high to keep their heads down, not expecting to hit anything but needing the noise, the distraction. "Go! I'll cover!" She scrambled towards the window, fumbling with the rusted latch. One of the tactical team, ignoring my fire, charged into the room, weapon up. I shot him in the leg, a messy, desperate shot. Saw him go down with a grunt, his weapon clattering. His partner paused in the doorway, assessing. Nina finally wrestled the window open, looked down at the two-story drop into the garbage-strewn alley, then back at me, terror in her eyes. "No time to be picky," I yelled, dodging another burst from the doorway. "Jump, I'll try to break your fall." It was a lie. I probably couldn't, but she needed to move. She squeezed her eyes shut and jumped. I heard a muffled thud and a cry of pain from below, prayed she hadn't broken anything vital. The remaining operative in the doorway was advancing again, more cautiously this time. I fired my last few rounds towards him, forcing him back again, then turned, and vaulted through the window myself, landing hard beside Nina in a pile of reeking garbage bags that only slightly cushioned the impact. "My ankle," she gasped, clutching it. "The same one. Twisted it again." "Can you walk?" I hauled her up. I think so." She leaned heavily on me. We stumbled down the alley, away from the sounds of shouting and renewed gunfire from the flophouse, likely the operatives firing at shadows or calling for backup. We needed to disappear, and fast. Nina's apartment was blown. My previous motel was blown. This flophouse was now a crime scene. Aethel's security, and by extension Ouroboros, would be turning Panama City upside down looking for us. We found temporary refuge in the cavernous, echoing belly of an abandoned waterfront warehouse near the old French Quarter, a place reeking of decay and desperation, far from the gleaming towers of the financial district. Nina's ankle was badly sprained, swelling rapidly. The data drive with the Aethel financials was still clutched in her hand, a small victory in a rapidly deteriorating situation. "They won't stop," Nina whispered, her face pale in the dim light filtering through broken windows. "Alistair Thorne, he'll tear this city apart to get that drive back and to silence us." "I know," I said grimly. "Your remote access to Aethel's servers is gone for good. They'll have locked down everything. The data we got is good, damning, but you said the real proof. The stuff that personally nails Thorne for your father, for the worst of Ouroboros' projects, is on his private server, maybe in a physical vault in his office." She nodded miserably. "His penthouse suite at Aethel Tower, top floor, biometric security, motion sensors, pressure plates, untouchable." "Nothing's untouchable," I said, though my confidence felt like a thin veneer over a core of pure dread. "Just harder to reach. Going head-to-head with Ouroboros in their own corporate fortress. It was insane. But what choice did we have? We couldn't run forever, and that data Nina risked everything for. It needed to see the light of day. Plus, the thought of Alistair Thorne sitting up there, untouchable, pulling strings that led to misery and death across the globe, it stuck in my craw. "You know the layout, Nina," I said. "Security protocols, shift changes, access points Thorne thinks are secure. Tell me everything." For the next few hours, huddled in that derelict warehouse, Nina sketched out the Aethel Tower schematics from memory on a dusty piece of cardboard, her voice low and urgent. The executive floors, Thorne's penthouse office, the location of his private vault, hidden behind a false wall, protected by layers of security she only knew about through rumors and accidentally glimpsed blueprints during a system upgrade. She also knew about a rarely used service elevator shaft that ran adjacent to Thorne's suite, one whose access controls were older, potentially less monitored. It was a long shot, but it was a shot. That night I went in alone. Nina, with her sprained ankle, was a liability for this kind of infiltration. I left her hidden, relatively safe, with a burner phone and instructions to call Sully via a prearranged emergency relay if I wasn't back by dawn with good news or bad. Aethel Tower loomed over the financial district, a monument to corporate power and Ouroboros' insidious reach. Getting past the ground floor security into the service areas required a stolen janitorial uniform, a confidently wielded mop bucket, and a healthy dose of feigned indifference. The old tricks were sometimes the best. Nina's intel on the service elevator shaft was spot on. Found it behind an unmarked door in a sub-basement utility corridor. The access panel was old, mechanical, easily bypassed. Climbing the dark, greasy shaft, using the maintenance ladder, felt like ascending into the belly of the beast. I emerged onto the executive level, a hushed world of expensive carpet, modern art, and silent motion-activated cameras. Bypassed those using techniques Thorne himself had ironically taught me years ago. Alistair Thorne's penthouse office suite was at the end of a private corridor, guarded by another layer of discreet but formidable security. Fingerprint scanner, retinal scanner on his private office door. But Nina had mentioned a secondary access point, a rarely used private conference room adjoining his office, sometimes left unsecured after late meetings. It was unlocked. I slipped inside. The conference room was opulent, dominated by a massive mahogany table. One wall was a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the glittering expanse of Panama City. Another wall, according to Nina, concealed the hidden door to Thorne's private vault. She described the release mechanism, a specific sequence of pressure applied to a seemingly innocuous piece of abstract sculpture on a nearby pedestal. My heart pounded as I approached the sculpture, found the almost invisible pressure points, applied the sequence Nina described. A faint click, and a section of the wall slid silently inward, revealing a heavy circular vault door, gleaming dully in the ambient light. Keypad, tumbler lock, biometric scanner, fortress grade. This was it, the core, where Thorne kept his real secrets, the ones that could burn Ouroboros to the ground. I pulled out the compact breaching tools I'd brought, a set designed for high-security safes, not usually bank vaults. Began to work on the keypad first, trying to bypass the direct input, looking for a diagnostic port, anything. That's when I heard it. Not a sound from the hallway, but a faint, almost inaudible click from the vault door itself, followed by a soft, high-pitched whine, a silent alarm, a secondary defense system I hadn't anticipated. Tiny red LEDs, previously dark, began to blink rhythmically around the vault door's circumference. Not good. Not good at all. I'd tripped something. My presence was detected. And Aethel Tower's security, Thorne's private army, would be converging on this floor, on this room, in seconds. I was behind corporate doors, at the threshold of the prize, but the alarm was sounding, and time had just run out. "Damn it!" I muttered, yanking Sparrow's useless thumb drive from the vault, maintenance port, as the ring of tiny red LEDs around the massive steel door pulsed with an insistent, silent alarm. Too easy. Far too easy. My gut churned. Thorne was too careful, his security too layered for such a blatant oversight as an exposed USB port leading to his inner sanctum. Unless it wasn't an oversight. Unless it was an invitation. My burner phone, the one Nina had for our secure comms, was probably useless now, but I tried anyway, hitting her speed dial. "Nina! Alarm! Thorne's office! They're on to us! Abort whatever you're doing! Get out!" Static. Then her voice, but not from my phone. It crackled, cool and composed, from the built-in intercom system on Alistair Thorne's massive mahogany desk. A large video screen on the wall opposite the desk flickered to life, showing Nina Petrova's face not pale and terrified as I'd last seen her, but strangely calm, almost serene, sitting in what looked like a comfortable, well-lit office. Not her cramped apartment. "No need to shout, Jack," she said, her voice smooth, devoid of the fear that had laced it for days. She even used my real name. So much for David Chance. "Or should I still call you Mr. Cole? Or perhaps Mr. Bishop? You do get around." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. The pieces clicked into place with sickening speed. The anonymous dead drop contact. The conveniently leaked data fragment. Her fear. Her personal vendetta against Thorne. All of it. "You played me," I stated, my voice flat, the anger a cold knot in my stomach. The room suddenly felt like a cage, Thorne's opulent office a gilded trap. "Played you?" Nina smiled faintly, a sad, tired expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Perhaps. Or perhaps, Jack, you simply played yourself. Did you really think someone with my limited field experience could stumble upon the deepest financial secrets of a corporation like Aethel and then blindly reach out to a ghost like you through ancient burned-out channels? Sully vetted the initial contact point, I said, more to myself than to her. Sully vets many things, she replied. He also forwards information he deems potentially useful to certain interested parties, especially when the bait is so perfectly tailored to a specific operative's known preoccupations. She gestured vaguely. Ouroboros, bioresearch, Alistair Thorne, all your favorite tunes, weren't they? The Ouroboros symbol Finch found at the Key West Gallery. That had been the hook that pulled me into the art forgery mess. This was a different lure, but just as effective. My own damn obsessions, my own past, used against me. So, the data I got from your apartment? I asked, my mind racing, cataloging the layers of deception. The offshore accounts, the project funding, was any of it real? Oh, it's real enough, Nina confirmed. Alistair Thorne is a key Ouroboros financier. Aethel Corporation is rotten to the core. The atrocities they fund are quite genuine. That part wasn't a lie. We needed you to believe the threat was credible enough to act, to come here. We? I repeated. Who's we, Nina? You and Thorne? You working for him all along? She shook her head, a flicker of genuine pain finally showing in her eyes. Not exactly. Let's just say Mr. Thorne became aware of my unauthorized research into his affairs and my, shall we say, personal interest in his past business dealings, the ones concerning my father. So that part, at least, had been true, the core of her leveraged. He offered me a choice, a very stark choice. Cooperate, help him draw out a known, persistent threat to Ouroboros' Panamanian operations, you, Jack, and ensure my family's continued well-being, or face the consequences. So he used your father's ruin, the revenge you wanted, to turn you into bait, I said, the bitter taste familiar. Thorne's manipulative genius, Marcus's and now Alistair's, always found the weakest point, the emotional leverage. He's very persuasive, Nina whispered, and very powerful. He knew you wouldn't be able to resist the Ouroboros connection, especially after Key West and the Everglades. He knew you'd come to Panama if the lure was strong enough. My whistleblowing was the perfect cover to get you here, get you focused on Aethel Tower. And the data I downloaded from her apartment? I asked, thinking of the drive still in my pocket. The stuff that got us chased through Casco Viejo? Genuine, as I said, Nina confirmed, but incomplete. Enough to convince you, enough to make you believe you were hurting them, enough to lead you here, to this office, to this vault. She gestured towards the sealed steel door. The real prize, the complete transaction records, the full Ouroboros financial architecture Thorne manages, that's inside there, and he knew you wouldn't be able to resist trying to get it. So the alarm I just tripped was expected, Nina finished. Part of the script. Mr. Thorne prefers to tie up loose ends personally, or at least observe their tying. Heavy footsteps pounded in the corridor outside the executive suite now, shouted commands in Spanish. They were here. Aethel's security, Ouroboros' cleanup crew. Why tell me all this now, Nina? I asked, my eyes scanning the office for any potential weapon, any desperate escape route. The windows were sealed, bulletproof, overlooking a 50-story drop. The vault door was impassable. The main office door was about to burst open. Because my father was a good man, she said, her voice barely a whisper, tears finally tracing paths down her cheeks. And because Thorne promised my family would be safe if I cooperated fully. He didn't say I couldn't apologize to the instrument of my own damnation. She looked directly at me, or rather at the camera transmitting her image. He's listening, you know, Alistair Thorne. He enjoys these little dramas. The handle on the main office door rattled violently. Then the sound of a keycard swiping, the lock disengaging. "It's over, Jack," Nina said softly from the screen, her image dissolving into static just as the heavy office door began to swing inwards. "I'm sorry." The first Aethel security operative through the door was big, armored, weapon already leveled. I didn't have Sparrow's kill switch this time, didn't have a prayer, just a heavy crystal paperweight from Thorne's ridiculously oversized desk clutched in my hand. He saw me move, his weapon spitting fire. I lunged anyway, aiming for his face, the paperweight a useless, desperate gesture against the inevitable. The web of lies had finally closed tight. The crystal paperweight shattered uselessly against the armored chest plate of the first Aethel security goon through Alistair Thorne AS office door. He didn't even flinch, just brought the butt of his submachine gun around in a short, brutal arc that connected with the side of my head. Stars exploded behind my eyes. I hit the plush blood-red carpet, the fight knocked out of me before it even began. More boots stormed in, hauling me up, zip ties biting into my wrists, a black hood smelling of stale sweat pulled roughly over my head. So much for going down swinging. I was dragged, half-conscious, through what felt like miles of hushed corporate corridors. The only sounds the muffled thumps of my own body against walls and the curt professional murmurs of my captors. Then an elevator, descending fast. When the hood finally came off, I was in a stark, windowless room somewhere deep in the bowels of Aethel Tower. Concrete walls, a single steel table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, 1 glaring overhead light. Classic interrogation chic. The door opened. Not Thorne himself, he wouldn't deign to get his hands dirty. It was the lean, hard-faced Eastern European I'd seen at the gala, Thorne's apparent security chief. He sat opposite me, placed a slim data slate on the table. No pleasantries. "Jack Kincaid," he said, his English precise, accented. "Or Mako, as your former associates called you. You've been a persistent irritation." "Glad to be of service," I managed, my head still throbbing. "Who do you work for now, Kincaid?" he asked, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Who sent you after Aethel? Who else knows about Nina Petrova's indiscretions?" I gave him my best tired smile. "Just a concerned citizen, doing my part to fight global evil. You know how it is." He didn't smile back. The next hour was unpleasant. No fists, no rubber hoses. Thorne's people were too sophisticated for that, at least initially. Just questions. Relentless, probing, circling back, trying to find cracks in my hastily constructed David Chance cover, trying to link me to other known Ouroboros enemies, trying to gauge the extent of the data breach caused by Petrova. I gave them nothing but variations on bewildered ignorance, playing the duped consultant caught in something over his head. They didn't buy it, but they couldn't break it either. Not yet. Eventually, the security chief sighed, a flicker of annoyance in his cold eyes. "Perhaps a change of scenery will refresh your memory, Kincaid." He nodded to the 2 guards who'd remained impassive by the door. "Take him to holding cell B7. Prep him for enhanced debriefing. Mr. Thorne wants answers before morning." Enhanced debriefing. That sounded ominous. The guards hauled me up again, roughly. As they frog-marched me out of the interrogation room and down another sterile corridor, I knew my time for playing dumb was running out. They were moving me deeper into their secure facility, likely towards something less pleasant than fluorescent lights and uncomfortable chairs. We passed an open doorway, a logistics or operations office, bustling even at this late hour. One of the guards paused, distracted by a shouted question from inside. In that brief moment, my eyes scanned the office. Wall-mounted screens displayed shipping schedules, port schematics, weather patterns over the Panama Canal. One screen showed a detailed cutaway of a container ship, specific containers highlighted in red, and on a large whiteboard, scrawled in grease pencil, were notes. Project Serpentine Transit, Phase 3 Vessel, Pacific Weaver, IMO 9XXXXX, Cargo, Container X7, Special Handling, Cat Gamma. Atia Miraflores, Locks Edo 400 HRS Pacific Exit, Confirmation, Client Zulu. Escort Asset Delta, Covered. My blood ran cold. Project Serpentine, Container X7, Category Gamma. That sounded terrifyingly familiar to the bioweapon classification Sully had dug up during the Everglades nightmare. Ouroboros wasn't just funding atrocities. They were moving something incredibly dangerous, something requiring special handling and a covert escort right through the Panama Canal. And the Pacific exit confirmation for Client Zulu, that implied delivery to an Asian Ouroboros faction or a rogue state. The guard behind me shoved me forward. "Move it!" The glimpse was all I got, but it was enough. The pieces clicked. Nina's horrified whispers about the atrocities Aethel was funding, the bio-research, the Nightingale variants. This had to be it. Ouroboros was using Aethel's legitimate shipping logistics and the cover of canal transit to move their deadliest wares. They shoved me into another elevator, this one clearly a service lift, utilitarian steel. Just me and 2 guards. This was it, my only chance. They were taking me deeper, further from any possibility of escape. I had to act now, while the intel about the Pacific Weaver and Container X7 was burning fresh in my mind. As the elevator began its descent, I feigned a coughing fit, doubling over, my cuffed hands dropping towards my ankles. One guard grunted, annoyed. "Stay still, Kincaid." I coughed again, harder this time, a ragged tearing sound, then suddenly lunged upwards and backwards, driving my head hard into the face of the guard behind me. Heard a satisfying crunch of cartilage, a muffled cry of pain. He stumbled back, clutching his nose. The other guard reacted, reaching for his sidearm, but the elevator was cramped. I kicked out savagely, connecting with his knee. He howled, buckling. Used the momentum, spinning, bringing my cuffed hands up and over the first guard's head, then down hard across his throat with the steel chain, using my body weight to drive him into the elevator wall. He slumped, gagging. Turned to the second guard, who was trying to bring his weapon to bear despite his injured knee. No time for finesse. I charged him, a pure shoulder tackle, slamming him against the control panel. Sparks flew as the panel cracked. The elevator lurched violently, lights flickering, then died, plunging us into momentary darkness between floors. Emergency lights kicked in, dim, red. The guard I'd tackled was dazed. I brought my cuffed hands down on his head like a club again and again until he went limp. Found his keys, uncuffed myself, grabbed his pistol. A heavy Sig Sauer, much better than the Makarov, relieved him of spare ammo. The elevator was stuck. Dead. But Thorne taught me about redundancies, emergency hatches. I found it in the ceiling. Climbed onto the shoulders of the unconscious guard, pushed it open, scrambled up into the dark, greasy elevator shaft, praying no other cars were active. Climbed the emergency ladder upwards, floor by floor, listening at each landing. Finally, found a deserted office level, accounts payable maybe, everyone gone home. Forced a fire door, emerged into a service stairwell. Down again, this time under my own power, moving fast, expecting alarms, lockdown. But the initial chaos I'd caused in the elevator, maybe the localized power surge, seemed to have confused the system, bought me precious minutes. Reached the ground floor parking garage, hot-wired the first anonymous sedan I found with decent tires. Smashed through the barrier arm at the exit, tires squealing, and disappeared into the humid labyrinth of Panama City's late-night streets. Free. For now. Battered. Bruised. My cover as David Chance utterly torched. Alistair Thorne and Ouroboros knew I was loose. Knew I'd been inside their tower. Knew I'd likely seen or heard something I shouldn't have. They'd be hunting me with everything they had. But I had something new. Container X7, the Pacific Weaver, Miraflores Locks, Euro 400 hours, Client Zulu. Ouroboros was moving something catastrophically dangerous through the Panama Canal in a matter of hours. I had to stop it. The how was a problem for the next 5 minutes. Right now, I just needed to put distance between me and Aethel Tower, find a place to think and figure out how one man, alone and hunted, could possibly intercept a covert syndicate shipment passing through one of the most heavily trafficked waterways on the planet. The danger on the canal was very real, and the clock was already ticking. "Sully! Mako, you read me?" I barked into the burner phone, gripping the wheel of the stolen sedan, weaving through Panama City's late-night traffic with a prayer and a lead foot. The Aethel Tower escape had been too close, the betrayal by Nina cutting deeper than any physical wound from the encounter. But there was no time for brooding. Not with Alistair Thorne's people now actively hunting me and a Category Gamma Ouroboros shipment due at the Miraflores locks in under 4 hours. Sully's voice crackled back, tinny but blessedly there, routed through God knew how many digital hoops. "Loud and clear, Jack. Figured you'd call. Alarms going off all over Aethel Tower like a damn Christmas tree. Thorne will have every asset he owns, official and otherwise, looking for you. What's the play?" "Forget me for now," I said, taking a sharp turn towards Corridor Sur, aiming for the quickest route to the canal's Pacific side. Project Serpentine Transit, Freighter Pacific Weaver, carrying container X7, tagged Category Gamma, ETA Miraflores locks, Aero 400 local. That's less than 4 hours. They're moving something nasty, Sully. Bio, chem, maybe worse. It's an Ouroboros special, heading for a Client Zulu Pacific exit. I need everything you got on that ship's transit protocol, pilot schedules, lock security, anything." "Jesus, Jack," Sully breathed. "Cat Gamma through the canal? That's insane." "Okay, Pacific Weaver. Got her on AIS. Just cleared the sea reach. Approaching the Bridge of the Americas. Standard Canal Authority pilot aboard. Lock transit is a high-security ballet even on a good day. Trying to stop a specific container mid-transit without triggering an international incident of biblical proportions." "Not trying to stop the whole damn ship, Sully," I cut him off, my mind racing. "Just container X7. Need to make it undeliverable. Create a localized problem on that container while it's in the locks. Something that forces a quarantine, an immediate, unavoidable inspection by canal authorities, maybe even U.S. Southern Command if the hazard is right. Buy time, expose the cargo." "You thinking a beacon? Small charge to damage the container seals? Trigger hazmat protocols?" Sully caught on fast. "Exactly. Need to get close enough to plant it while she's in the Miraflores chamber. What's access like down there? Service tunnels? Can I get onto a lock wall?" "Miraflores is a fortress, Jack, especially at night," Sully said grimly. "Heavy ACP, Panama Canal Authority police presence, plus their own internal security. But there are maintenance access points, old service culverts running beneath the lock walls. Some might be less diligently monitored, sending you schematics now. Risky as all hell. And Thorne will have people watching that ship, his asset Delta escort." "Risk is my middle name tonight," I muttered, pushing the sedan harder. The drive to Miraflores was a blur of neon, shadows, and the ever-present humid Panamanian heat. I ditched the hot sedan a mile from the visitor center, using the last of its fuel, then moved on foot through the humid darkness, paralleling the access roads, heading for the massive concrete structures of the locks themselves. The scale of the place was staggering, even at night. Towering control buildings, huge steel gates, the deep water-filled chambers waiting to lift ships from one ocean to another. And the Pacific Weaver was already there. A behemoth gliding silently into the first lock chamber, guided by canal pilots and the powerful mule locomotives running on rails alongside. Sully's schematics, downloaded to my burner tablet, showed a disused drainage culvert on the west wall of the upper chamber, potentially offering access to the lock wall itself, right where the Pacific Weaver would be held stationary as the water levels changed. Getting there meant a low crawl through wet grass, then squeezing through a rusted grate into a dark, narrow tunnel smelling of stagnant water, and God knew what else. I found container X7 easily enough once I was on the lock wall, crouching in the deep shadow between massive bollards. It was midship, on the main deck, slightly set apart, maybe with a couple of those unobtrusive Asset Delta Ouroboros guards pretending to be crewmen lingering nearby. Looked like any other 40-foot shipping container, painted a dull, anonymous gray. But the faint hum emanating from it and the small, almost invisible hazard placards near the door seals told a different story. The Pacific Weaver was secure in the chamber now, water beginning to adjust. I had maybe 15 minutes. Moving like a ghost, using the noise of the lock machinery and the shadows cast by the ship's hull, I got alongside. Pulled out the device I de-prepped, a compact limpet charge with a variable timer and a secondary high-frequency locator beacon, all wrapped in waterproof casing. The charge was small, directional, just enough to breach the container's outer seal and trigger internal alarms or leak detectable material, not enough to cause a catastrophic spill, hopefully. The beacon would ensure authorities found this specific container. Reached up, slapped the magnetic charge onto the lower door seam of X7, shielded from casual view. Set the timer for 10 minutes, long enough for me to get clear, short enough to go off while the ship was still within canal jurisdiction. Just as I armed it, a voice barked from the deck above me. "Oye, ¿quién está ahí? Hey, who's there?" One of the Asset Delta guards, leaning over the railing, peering down into the shadows, his silhouette stark against the lock lights. He hadn't seen me clearly, but he knew something was wrong. No time to be subtle. I scrambled back from the ship's hull, heading for the service ladder leading down from the lock wall into the maintenance tunnels. The guard shouted again, then his weapon coughed, suppressed, but the rounds whined off the concrete near me. I reached the ladder, started down. Heard more shouts from the ship's deck. They knew. They were coming. The alarm wasn't just on my device. It was on me. Reached the bottom of the ladder, plunged back into the service tunnel. Then a new sound. Heavy boots pounding on the lock wall above the tunnel entrance. More guards, landside, alerted by the commotion, cutting off my primary escape route back through the culvert. Trapped again. Behind me, Asset Delta coming down the ladder. Ahead, more guards converging. And in my pocket, a small, crumpled data chip ID managed to snatch from a discarded jacket pocket belonging to one of the goons back at the Flophouse raid. No idea what was on it. Just grabbed it in the chaos. A fragment of a plan, maybe. Or nothing. The 10-minute timer on the limpet charge was ticking. The Pacific Weaver was a floating time bomb, whether anyone else knew it yet or not. And I was stuck in the guts of the Panama Canal with Ouroboros closing in from all sides. The daring operation had just become a desperate fight for survival, with the outcome of my obstruction hanging heavy in the humid pre-dawn air. I pulled out the Sig Sauer I'd taken from Thorne's security, checked the load, and prepared to make things very, very loud. "Sully, you reading this? You better be reading this," I grunted into the burner phone. Ducked low in the slimy darkness of the Miraflores lock service tunnel, the sound of boots and angry Spanish echoing from both ends. Asset Delta, Thorne's Canal escort team, was not pleased. And my little firework on container X7 had likely brought every cop and security guard within a 5-mile radius running. Time to leave. The limpet charge went active. Pacific Weaver is lit up, but I'm currently between a rock and a pissed-off Ouroboros tactical team. Need a clean exit plan from this rat maze like yesterday. Sully's voice, preternaturally calm as always, crackled back after a moment. "Working on it, Jack. Canal Authority schematics show a storm drain outflow about 200 meters west of your current approximate. Might be tight, might be full of actual rats, but it should dump you near the old Gaillard Cut access road." He paused. "One other thing. That data chip you grabbed from the Flophouse operative back in Casco Viejo finally cracked the second-level encryption while you were playing Frogman." "And," I snapped, peering around a rusted pipe bend, saw a flashlight beam sweep the tunnel ahead. They were closing in. Ledgers? encrypted comms, internal Aethel Corp security directives. It seems Nina Petrova, your whistleblower, wasn't entirely forthcoming about her current status after you two parted ways post-gala escape. Get to it, Sully. Looks like Alistair Thorne didn't just let her walk after she supposedly fed you to his gallery goons. He grabbed her. She's currently residing in Thorne's penthouse suite at Aethel Tower. Not as a guest, as a data processing asset. Thorne's cleaning house after the server breach you and she pulled off. He's forcing her to consolidate all incriminating Ouroboros financial data onto a single, heavily encrypted drive for secure archival, meaning, likely, for him to control or destroy personally. She's his fail-safe and his scapegoat, all in one. Nina, back in Thorne's clutches, being forced to handle the very data she tried to expose. The irony was a bitter pill, and the guilt, that was all mine. I'd left her after the gallery ambush, assumed she was part of the betrayal, a willing pawn. Now, it sounded like she was just another victim, leveraged again. She still have the original drive with the data she downloaded before? I asked, already knowing the answer was probably no. Unlikely Thorne would let her keep that souvenir, Sully confirmed. He's creating a new master file under his direct control using her expertise. If he succeeds, that data vanishes into the Ouroboros black hole forever, and Nina, well, loose ends. Damn it. The Ouroboros Hydra. Cut off one head, two more slither out of the woodwork. I'd stop the canal shipment, maybe. But Thorne was still about to secure ultimate control of the financial evidence that could burn his whole Panama operation down, and Nina was trapped in the middle of it. The storm drain, Sully, I said, making a decision. Give me the route. Getting out of the canal tunnels was a wet, miserable, close-run thing involving more crawling, more near misses with search teams, and emerging into the pre-dawn Panama City humidity, looking and smelling like something dredged from the bottom of a sewer. Found another anonymous beater car, hot-wired it, and headed back towards the glittering glass spike of Aethel Tower. Going back in there after the gallery disaster, after Nina's apparent and now clearly coerced betrayal, felt like volunteering for my own execution. But leaving Nina to Thorne, letting him secure that data, not an option. Not anymore. Re-infiltrating Aethel Tower required a different approach. The service entrances would be on high alert. But Nina, in her initial panicked briefing days ago, had mentioned Thorne's obsession with his penthouse-esque panoramic city views and his equally obsessive demand for absolute privacy during his late-night contemplations on the rooftop terrace adjoining his suite. An architectural flaw, maybe? A high-risk, high-reward access point? It involved an audacious climb up the exterior maintenance scaffolding of the still under-construction skyscraper next door, a terrifying traverse across a narrow connecting girder 50 floors above the sleeping city, and then a rappel down onto Thorne's private rooftop terrace using equipment ID liberated from a construction locker. Adrenaline sang through my veins, sharp and clean, overriding the exhaustion. The terrace door leading into Thorne's penthouse suite was, as Nina had hinted, unlocked, Thorne's arrogance assuming no one could reach it. I slipped inside. The suite was a monument to corporate power and bad taste, acres of black marble, chrome, abstract art that probably cost more than a small African nation's GDP. And in the center of the main living area, at a large glass desk dominated by multiple monitors, sat Nina Petrova. She looked even worse than before. Pale, gaunt, dark circles under her eyes, but her fingers moved with frantic precision across a specialized keyboard, data streams scrolling across one of the monitors. Alistair Thorne stood behind her, watching, a smug, proprietary smile on his face. The lean Eastern European security chief, the one from the gala and the initial interrogation, stood near the main entrance to the suite, a silent, menacing sentinel. "Ah, Mr. Kincaid," Thorne said calmly, turning as I stepped fully into the room, pistol raised. He didn't seem surprised. Maybe Nina's earlier apology on the comms had been a coded warning he anticipated I might act on. Or maybe he just expected me. Or should I call you Mako? Such persistence. Commendable in a futile sort of way. Nina was just finalizing the consolidation of certain sensitive archives for secure off-site storage. He gestured towards the monitor. A pity you won't be around to see the benefits of our corporate restructuring. The only restructuring I'm interested in, Thorne, I said, keeping my voice level, my pistol steady on him, is the kind that puts you and your Ouroboros pals out of business, permanently. I glanced at Nina. Nina, step away from the terminal, now. She looked from me to Thorne, then back, her eyes wide with terror. Torn. Don't be foolish, my dear, Thorne said softly to her, his voice like silk over steel. Mr. Kincaid is a loose end, a disruption. You, on the other hand, still have a chance to prove your renewed loyalty. The security chief by the door started to move. I shifted my aim slightly. Don't try it. Nina, I said again, more urgently. That data, is it all there? The stuff you were after? The proof against him? She nodded almost imperceptibly, her gaze fixed on the small, encrypted data drive connected to the terminal. The master file. Then grab it, I ordered, and get behind me. For a split second, nobody moved. Thorne's smile tightened. The security chief tensed. Nina stared at the drive, then at Thorne, then at me. Then, with a sudden, convulsive movement, she didn't grab the drive. She slammed her hand down on a different part of the keyboard. A master delete command? A system wipe? No! Thorne roared, lunging towards the console. Too late. The screens flickered, went dark. Nina slumped back in her chair, a strange look of fierce, desperate triumph on her face. If I can't have justice, she whispered, loud enough for me to hear, then neither can you, Alistair. The security chief reacted instantly, raising his weapon not at me, but at Nina. Before he could fire, before Thorne could reach her, I moved, dove towards the desk, not to save the data. That was likely gone, but to save her. The showdown wasn't just about files anymore, it was about lives. And Alistair Thorne, his face contorted with rage at being denied his prize, his control, was about to learn just how inconvenient a truly desperate man could be. The battle for the data, and for Nina, exploded in the penthouse suite. Nina's desperate shout, "If I can't have justice, then neither can you, Alistair!" still echoed in the opulent penthouse suite, as Alistair Thorne lunged towards the now darkened console, his face a mask of fury. The lead Aethel security goon, the hard-faced Eastern European from the gala, didn't waste time on computer diagnostics. He brought his suppressed submachine gun up, spitting fire directly at Nina. I moved without thinking, tackling Nina sideways, pulling her off the chair, both of us crashing hard onto the ridiculously thick Persian rug, just as rounds chewed through the expensive leather where she'd been sitting. More security flooded the room, fanning out, weapons sweeping. "Thorne wants them alive!" the Eastern European barked, his voice tight with controlled rage. "Especially Kincaid. Secure the woman. Get the drive." Alive. Small comfort. Thorne likely had creative ideas for debriefing anyone who cost him access to his Ouroboros slush fund master file. I rolled, coming up behind an oversized marble coffee table that wouldn't stop much but offered momentary cover. Fired the Sig Sauer ID taken from the Aethel Tower guard during my escape. 2 quick shots at the nearest advancing tactical figure, making him duck. "Nina, the drive you downloaded from your apartment!" I yelled over the gunfire. "Still got it?" She was pale, terrified, but her eyes blazed with a defiant fire I hadn't seen before. She patted her jacket pocket. "Yes, here!" That was all I needed. That initial partial download was our only weapon now. The master file Thorne was consolidating, Nina's defiant keystrokes had likely turned it into digital confetti. The Eastern European security chief was good, directing his men trying to flank me, cut off any escape towards the terrace I'd used for entry. Thorne himself had vanished, probably into a panic room or private elevator, leaving his hired muscle to clean up the mess. Typical. "We can't hold them here," I shouted to Nina, who was now trying to crawl behind a ridiculously ornate chaise lounge. "Need a diversion, something big." She looked around wildly, then her eyes fixed on Thorne's massive floor-to-ceiling liquor cabinet, stocked with bottles that probably cost more than my annual boat insurance. "The bar!" she screamed. "Alcohol!" It was desperate, but desperate was what we had. While I laid down suppressing fire, forcing the security team to keep their heads down, Nina scrambled towards the bar, grabbed 2 of the heaviest, most expensive-looking bottles of single-malt scotch, and hurled them with surprising accuracy towards a bank of exposed server racks powering Thorne's personal office network, the ones probably still trying to process her failed data consolidation. Glass shattered. Amber liquid splashed across hot electronics. Sparks flew. Then, with a satisfying whoomph, a small electrical fire ignited, quickly spreading to the surrounding expensive drapery. Smoke alarms shrieked, adding their voice to the general cacophony. The Eastern European snarled an order. 2 of his men broke off, grabbing fire extinguishers. The distraction was minimal, but it was something. "Now!" I grabbed Nina's arm, pulling her towards the main office door, the one leading back out to the executive corridor. Not the way I came in, but maybe less expected. We burst through, finding 2 more guards in the corridor, clearly part of Thorne's personal detail, rushing towards the commotion. They weren't expecting us. I dropped the first one with a double tap to the chest. The second one got off a wild shot that shattered a nearby abstract painting before Nina surprisingly swung her heavy handbag, the one that had already proven its worth against Costin, in a desperate arc connecting solidly with his gun hand. His weapon clattered away. I finished him with a quick, brutal blow. "You're learning," I grunted at Nina, pulling her towards the emergency stairwell. "Necessity," she panted back, adrenaline making her reckless. We pounded down flight after flight of stairs, alarms wailing throughout the tower now. Fire suppression systems likely kicking in on the top floor, adding water to the smoke. Aethel Tower was officially having a very bad night. Getting out of the building at ground level was another chaotic scramble, dodging confused office workers from lower floors, some companies worked late, bluffing our way past initial responding building security who hadn't gotten the memo about a firefight in the penthouse yet, and finally emerging onto the humid Panama City street a block away, melting into the late-night traffic just as the first police sirens approached the tower. We didn't stop running until we reached a prearranged, anonymous internet cafe several blocks away, one Sully had designated for emergency uploads if things went sideways. My heart hammered against my ribs. Nina looked like she was about to collapse, but she clutched the encrypted thumb drive fiercely. "Sully," I typed into the secure comms app on a battered terminal after Nina, with shaking hands, plugged in her drive. "Meko, Petrova Secure. Have original partial data package. Aethel Tower currently on fire, Thorne likely compromised or fled. Uploading now. Disseminate. Everything. International press. Reuters, AP, BBC, financial regulators, SEC, Swiss FinMe, FATF. Anyone with teeth who can't be bought by Ouroboros. Burn Thorne, burn Aethel, now." Sully's reply was immediate. "Acknowledged, Mako. Receiving data stream. Looks substantial. Will package and deploy through multiple secure channels. Stand by for confirmation. And Jack, well done. Both of you." We sat there in the dingy internet cafe, surrounded by kids playing online games and backpackers checking email, the smell of stale coffee and cheap cigarettes thick in the air, while gigabytes of Aethel Corporation's dirtiest secrets, Ouroboros' financial lifelines, Alistair Thorne's personal authorizations for unspeakable projects flowed through the digital ether to Sully. It took maybe 20 minutes, then Sully's confirmation, data disseminated. Initial pings hitting news desks now, financial regulators alerted via secure whistleblower portals. The web is unraveling, Jack. Nicely done. Over the next few hours, watching a flickering TV in the corner of a 24-hour cafeteria, we saw the first ripples. Urgent news flashes. Aethel Corporation Panama HQ raided by authorities amidst allegations of massive financial fraud, terror funding. Stock tickers showing Aeth plummeting into oblivion. Grainy footage of Panamanian police surrounding Aethel Tower. Then later reports that Alistair Thorne had resigned due to health reasons, and his current whereabouts were unknown. An international warrant was being issued. Nina watched, tears streaming silently down her face, a lifetime of grief and anger finally finding release. Her father hadn't been forgotten. His destroyer was now the hunted. "We did it," she whispered, looking at me, her eyes reflecting a fragile mixture of disbelief and dawning hope. "We actually did it." "We kicked the anthill," I corrected, feeling a grim satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. "Ouroboros is big, Nina. They'll cut Aethel loose, sacrifice Thorne, reroute their money. But today we made them bleed. We exposed a major artery." The web was unraveled, at least this section of it. The corporation's corrupt influence was shattered, its funding of Ouroboros operations exposed to the harsh glare of international scrutiny. It wasn't the end of the syndicate, not by a long shot, but it was a significant blow, a victory snatched from the jaws of betrayal and certain death. For Nina, it was a measure of justice. For me, it was a reminder that sometimes, just sometimes, even a broken tool could still strike a meaningful blow against the darkness. The shadows were still out there, vast and deep. But tonight, there was a little more light. The sirens faded behind us as we ditched the smoking rental car in a labyrinthine alley near the Mercado de Bujonerias, Panama City's sprawling flea market, a place where anything could be bought sold or conveniently lost in the throng. Nina Petrova leaned heavily against me, adrenaline giving way to shock and exhaustion, her face pale but streaked with a strange mixture of soot from Thorne's burning office and triumphant tears. Her desperate gamble, slamming those keys, had wiped Alistair Thorne's meticulously consolidated Ouroboros archive. A Pyrrhic victory, maybe, but a victory nonetheless. He won't have it," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "The full ledger. My father. He'd be—" She couldn't finish. "He'd be proud, Nina," I said, meaning it. She'd shown more guts in that penthouse than a battalion of agency yes-men. But her part in this was over. She was a civilian, a whistleblower who'd done her part, spectacularly. Now she was a massive liability, to herself and to me. Alistair Thorne, even disgraced and on the run, had Ouroboros resources. He'd hunt her to the ends of the earth for what she did, for what she knew. Getting her out of Panama, out of Ouroboros' reach, became the immediate priority. Sully, once I reached him via a heavily encrypted public terminal after navigating us to a slightly less conspicuous flophouse than our last one, came through. He still had contacts, owed favors in odd corners of the world. Within 24 hours, Nina Petrova, armed with a new identity courtesy of Sully's forgers. Anna Kovalenko, Ukrainian art student with a scholarship to study in Lisbon, was on a non-direct flight out of Tocumen International, routed through 3 neutral countries. Her original data drive, the one with the partial Aethel financials, I kept. It was still potent. Our parting at the airport was brief, awkward. "Thank you, Jack," she'd said, her eyes surprisingly clear, the fear replaced by a weary resolve. "For believing me. Eventually." "Stay safe, Nina," I told her. "Stay offline. Disappear." She nodded. "You too." Then she turned and walked towards the gate, blending into the stream of anonymous travelers. Just another face in the crowd. Hopefully, a face Ouroboros would never find. My own exit from Panama was less formal, involving a rusty coastal freighter heading for Cartagena, than a series of increasingly uncomfortable bus rides north through Central America, relying on old tradecraft border towns known for lax controls and the last of Finch's Key West expense money. Took weeks. Weeks spent watching my back, sleeping with one eye open, feeling the Ouroboros network like an invisible web stretching across the continent. Finally, I was back in Florida, back on the Sea Witch, anchored in a quiet cove up the forgotten coast where the pines met the salt marsh, and the only company was the ospreys and the tides. The old boat felt like a sanctuary, a familiar embrace after the concrete canyons and corporate fortresses of Panama City. Sully's final update on the Aethel Corporation meltdown was grimly satisfying. Global investigations, assets frozen, stock delisted, executives resigning in droves. Alistair Thorne himself was an international fugitive, last seen vanishing into the labyrinth of offshore finance and shell corporations Ouroboros specialized in. The Panama operation was gutted, a major financial artery severed. A win. But sitting on the deck of the Sea Witch, watching the sunset paint the marsh grass gold, the victory felt incomplete. Hollow. Aethel Corp was just one head of the Hydra. Alistair Thorne was just one high-level operative, a corporate proxy. Ouroboros itself, the real beast, remained hidden, vast, its tendrils reaching into every corner of the globe. What Nina Petrova had stumbled upon, what I'd helped her expose, wasn't just a corrupt company, it was a method. Ouroboros wasn't just working through traditional criminal enterprises anymore. The smugglers, the arms dealers, the bio-research fronts. They were embedding themselves within legitimate, powerful multinational corporations like Aethel, using their resources, their legal structures, their political clout as perfect camouflage. Corporate espionage wasn't just a sideline for them. It was a fundamental strategy. They could fund wars, topple governments, develop horrific weapons, all under the guise of quarterly earnings reports and philanthropic foundations. How many other Aethels were out there? How many respectable CEOs were secretly Ouroboros lieutenants, using shareholder money to fuel global terror and chaos? How many whistleblowers were just pawns in their internal power struggles, or bait like Nina had initially been for me? The layers of deception were dizzying, the potential scope of their infiltration terrifying. The data drive Nina had given me, the one with the partial Aethel financials, felt heavy in my pocket. It was proof of one such proxy operation, but it also hinted at others, at coded transaction pathways leading to other seemingly legitimate entities, other philanthropic foundations, other respected names. The Ouroboros symbol I'd seen in Finch's gallery, the one I'd embedded in my final sad report years ago after Romania, it wasn't just a rogue faction. It was the signature of a new kind of global power, one that operated beyond borders, beyond laws, beyond morality. Marcus Thorne, my old mentor, was part of it. Silas Vance in Panama, Harrison Croft in Miami. They were all nodes in this sprawling, interconnected web. And I, Jack Kincaid, was just one man on a boat, trying to make sense of it, trying to find a way to fight an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere. The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky bruised purple and the water a sheet of dark glass. The air grew cool. My old wounds ached, a familiar reminder of past battles, past betrayals. Nina Petrova was safe, hopefully starting a new life, her father's memory honored in some small way by Alistair Thorne's downfall. That was something, a small victory, a single thread pulled from the web, but the web remained. The shadows in the aftermath of Panama felt deeper, wider, more insidious than ever before. Ouroboros wasn't just a syndicate. It was a cancer, metastasizing within the legitimate structures of the world. And I knew, with a certainty that settled cold and hard in my gut, that my retirement was still a long way off. The next mission wasn't a question of if, but when, and from what unexpected corner the next tendril of the conspiracy would emerge. The fight for illumination, for some semblance of justice in a world drowning in deception, was far from over.